Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, One Piece chapter 1061 is out. If you guys haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so because I will be spoiling you. Now that you have, let's begin. I enjoyed this chapter probably as much as any hype chapter from Wano. Like, I know that that's not necessarily how everyone else experiences One Piece, I get that. But all the fights, even things like Gear 5th Luffy, which I absolutely loved, this is just as good to me. But anyway, let's just jump into the chapter from the beginning. We started off on fire. We ended the last chapter with Bonnie's appearance. They got her out of the water event. And then we see here, we come back and the chopper's still flying. It's still hectic. And then suddenly, Oda went hard with the shark underneath the Thousand Sunny. That drawing blew my mind. Breathtaking. I legitimately have never been so hyped for a shark in my entire life when I saw that panel. Of course, you scroll down and then you see the shark again, and this time he is derpy as hell. You know, in One Piece, right? That's how it goes. But right from page 1, Oda had me off my feet. And so we get this shark, and it's not a real shark, or it's not like a normal shark. It is clearly some kind of robot, but it's very expressive, and along the side it says Punk. Combined with the chapter title as well, Future Island, you know what you're dealing with here. Hype levels through the roof. The action in this sequence was honestly amazing. Like, from Chopper and Luffy falling into the sea, Jinbei having a sort of moment to shine, just encountering the shark itself. I think that, this creation, robot, creature, combination of the two, whatever it might be, we'll discuss it later, is strong. It's a real problem. Imagine like an army of these things. Every single regular marine ship would stand no chance. It's not like devil fruit users can do much against a shark that's literally in the sea. Some could, right? You could be like Aokiji and freeze the sea. I'm sure that would work. But in general, right? Very strong. I low-key had a look at how far we've come moment reading the chapter when the shark sent the missiles to the Thousand Sunny, and it actually looked like it made contact. I couldn't help but think about the Going Merry. At this moment, if they're still on the Going Merry, that ship is vaporized. I actually thought for a half second that the missiles damaged the Thousand Sunny. Thousand Sunny made out of Adam's wood, that would have been a big deal. Because Frankie says we're capsizing, and initially I didn't know what that meant until suddenly the ship is landing on the water in the wrong way. But I do feel like it's important to point out, the Strat's lost. This, of course, they know that eventually Luffy's going to become the king of the pirate. They win at the end of the day, right? Even if they lose, they don't lose. But in this case, without some sort of luck or some sort of help, which they received, they lost to the shark. But as I said, they were saved, and they were saved by a giant robot. Embarrassing confession here, but I actually thought that robot was some new version of General Frankie. I really thought that, even though it said Vega or Punk, whatever it said, I think it said Vega. It said Vega on the robot, and I already knew that Vegapunk appeared in the chapter because of the spoilers. I still thought it was Frankie. Now you know why my dumbass doesn't live react. So needless to say, I was in for a pretty huge shock. But then we pan to a nearby island, G14 Naval Base, where we get to see Tashigi and the children of Punk Hazard again, as well as quite a few new characters, including new members of Sword. There's really not much to say here other than the hype for Sword is building. We have G14 Base, which is near Egghead. I'm expecting Tashigi, Smoker, the children to come back into the story in some way, like it's inevitable, and then I'm expecting something about Sword. It just feels like the natural time to start digging in. But from here we go back to Egghead, and we find out that Luffy, Jinbei, and Jewelry Bonnie have separated from the rest of the crew, and this is great. First off, I think just to get to know Bonnie better, I think it'd be easy to overshadow her with every other Straw Hat character there, so it's going to separate out a bit, and I'm really excited to just see what she does and find out who she is. She tells us that she didn't travel with her crew, she came alone, and I think that we know why. We speculated after the last chapter when Bonnie first appeared, I thought that it made sense for her to seek out Vegapunk, and that makes sense because of Kuma. Yes, they saved Kuma or rescued Kuma from the Celestial Dragons, but he's still not right. He's not himself. So this appears to me to be Bonnie's motivation. I thought it was hilarious that Luffy didn't know who she was. Casual One Piece fan, Luffy. I'm sure that people are going to want me to discuss or be more interested in Bonnie's comment, where she said, "I thought your hair was white now." They made quite a stir about it in the papers, you know? And Luffy said, "Oh, that's just how I look when I'm totally free." This just wasn't a surprise to me. That's kind of how his powers work, right? He changes reality around him as he chooses. It makes him more free. So it's very fitting, it's symbolically appropriate, and I'm sure that was part of the thought process that Oda had when designing it, but it didn't really catch me off guard in any way. It's just sort of like, yeah, of course. Although, I think that you could take this deeper if you wanted to. I'm not sure that I believe this, but there may still be powers that his Devil Fruit has that he hasn't unlocked yet. And as it relates to freedom, there could be significance there. Just one of the ways that I think about this is we know that Luffy has the Hito Hito no Mi model Nika, and it's explained as essentially a joke fruit, you know, a laughing fruit. But there may be a component of freedom to it as well ingrained in the fruit. And it could lead to some awesome quote from Oda suggesting something to the effect of laughter and joy is what the pursuit of freedom is all about. Which I do feel like I expect at some point or something related to this because, man, we've talked about this before, the two sides of freedom. Freedom is this hyped up thing, but it can also be abused. But yeah, also the obligatory Bonnie went full smoker. And I'm here for it. We didn't actually get to this. I was going to talk about this in a comments video to the last chapter. But an interesting theory that I heard about Bonnie is we see her as she was within the ocean water phenomenon, that she came out as a kid. And so we know that the ocean messes with Devil Fruit abilities. So some people wondered whether or not kid version of Bonnie is the real version of her. She got spit out of the whirlpool ball as a child because the sea nullified her Devil Fruit abilities, returning her to her natural age. I bring this up because we don't know exactly why she's so brazenly just showing off her body to the men around her. She really doesn't care, and that may just be a character quirk of her as an adult woman. It's totally possible, but just from the standpoint of this theory that she is in fact a kid who has the ability to age herself up, it does make a lot of sense to me for like a pre-pubescent child to care less about that sort of thing. Along with the other habits that we see, she loves junk food and pizza, also very childlike. Again, not that an adult can't be like this, but, you know, building a theory. I like it. Some people might argue that we actually already know who she is, because she poses as Dowager Connie in Mary Joie. But I don't necessarily 100% buy this yet, because she could still be a kid, age herself up to grandma levels, and then pose as, for instance, her own grandmother. But all this is interesting to me because it changes the dynamics between her and Kuma. She might legitimately be Kuma's daughter, so we'll see. But then we pan out and see Egghead Island itself, and it looks like a hatched egg with an inconsistent ring around it which resembles a planet. I presume that all of this is unnatural. We've seen Vegapunk's islands before, or his home island, and it's totally changed. But I'm not gonna lie, a part of me really hopes that this is some sort of natural phenomenon or relic or something a little bit more interesting than a random idea that Vegapunk had. Like the egg of some sort of mythological god of the One Piece world. Maybe Vegapunk recreated it. I know that that's unlikely, but yeah, I'd like that. And then finally we cut back to the rest of the Straw Hats, which were saved by the giant robot. And then a woman steps out. She says, "God, this won't do it all. It's another failure, I wonder why though. Perhaps overriding primal desires is simply impossible. I ordered the mecha shark to scout, report, and fire, but it keeps trying to eat ships. There won't be anything left to salvage. I must have bungled the programming. Forgive me, but did you just say that I saved you? Oh, you naive pirates. I work for the government. Despite my mediocrity, they like to call me their scientific genius. You can call me Dr. Vegapunk." Whenever everybody is absolutely sure that something is going to happen, and it doesn't have to be that way, you can be sure that Oda is going to play with it. So everyone pictured like Albert Einstein, right? Like all the scientific geniuses in pretty much every story ever. And he's like, nah, waifu. Or maybe not. There's a lot to discuss here. I'm not saying that Vegapunk can't be a woman or can't be the woman that we see here in the chapter, but it was pointed out to those who read Japanese that Vegapunk speaks like an old man would. We also see numbers on the creations, Vegapunk's creations in the chapter. The shark, for instance, is number 03. We see the giant robot is number 12, and we see a number on Vegapunk as well, and that number is 02. So I'm of the opinion that if this is Dr. Vegapunk, this is not his or her real body. And I believe this is pretty much confirmed, at least in one respect. We know that Vegapunk was alive 50 years ago. The Vegapunk that we see here right now is definitely not 50 years old. So it's possible that this is or was Vegapunk's real body. I've heard theories such as this is a clone. We know that this is possible because of Vinsmoke tech. I think that it's also possible that Vegapunk experimented on himself perhaps in a similar way as Frankie. So, Vegapunk is essentially a robot. That's why he doesn't age. Again, this is possible. Side note here, I know I'm butchering my pronouns, but I've literally thought of Vegapunk as a dude for a decade, so it's a real hard habit to break. I mean, he or she could be a man or woman, we don't know. I think I lean towards him being a man because I think that this body is not real, and we know that from the Japanese readers, Vegapunk speaks like an old man would. But we don't know yet. Anyway, did anyone else think that her arms don't look exactly right? It almost looks like long arms. So I'm definitely expecting something crazy there. Another thought that I had is I would really like if Vegapunk was at least somewhat inspired by or could be compared to the wizard from The Wizard of Oz. For whatever reason, like you have this futuristic mega genius scientist, and it's kind of almost like being a wizard. Science is kind of magic. So Vegapunk is the person behind the curtain. When you first meet the Wizard of Oz, he's this imposing, scary looking hologram thing, just a giant head, right? And then you pull back the curtain and you see it's just, a dude. It would make sense to me for, I don't know how old Vegapunk really is, but he might be ancient. So he might be locked up in his room essentially on survival mode while his consciousness has been given to or in some way feeds into this Vegapunk 02 model. But he's actually dying. I don't know, that thought crossed my mind and I liked it a lot. Either way, I feel like there's intrigue here, and I think that pretty much anything that Oda chooses is going to be incredibly satisfying. Even if it's just like, look, what you see is what you get. But this wasn't just a Vegapunk reveal. We also got a little insight into who Vegapunk is, and it answers a question that we've had for months, if not years now. Particularly Wano, or the end of Wano, when it was abundantly clear that Momo's failed artificial devil fruit did not appear all that failed. Vegapunk is really hard on themselves. I think what Oda's going for here is that Vegapunk is a perfectionist. It's brilliant, in part because it's hilarious. It sets up a potential joke, but it also ties into everything that we know already. Like, I just want you to understand how brilliant this is. And when it comes to character designs, Oda loves throwing extremes together. So, or, like absurd combinations. You have the smartest man in the world who's created a country that's 500 years in the future, and he or she, damn it, they think that they're mediocre. Going back to Momo's artificial devil fruit, in what ways could it be a failure? Well, it seems just like Kaido's fruit in every, relevant way. It doesn't appear as if he has any powers, or doesn't have any powers that Kaido had. Maybe he's just generally weaker. I suppose that's a possibility. I don't really buy that either. The hilarious joke here is that Vegapunk deemed the fruit a failure because the dragon is the wrong color. I seriously think that. But to add another layer here, I really hope that Vegapunk is more justified than they seem to be. A theory on my mind that I've mentioned before, I commented this a few weeks ago, is whether or not Vegapunk is essentially a technology thief. This thought actually occurred to me a long time, but we know that Vegapunk is from Karakuri Island, the future country. But we know of another scientist, inventor type character that lived there, Dr. Tsukimi. I'll forgive you if you don't remember who this is, but Tsukimi was a random side character in Enel's cover story. And the interesting thing about him is that he worked on automata on Karakuri Island. He has automata, and then we follow Enel's cover story. Enel travels to the moon, and what does he find there? He finds automata. An army of them are there and powered down, practically identical to the ones that Tsukimi worked on Karakuri Island. What's important here is that these automata that are on the moon are ancient. This is an ancient technology, as if sometime in the distant past, technology surpassed what it is on the One Piece world today. But the fact that they're identical suggests something, as if Dr. Tsukimi somehow had a way of copying the tech of the past. So he didn't invent automata and they just didn't happen to look identical. He had something from the past to work based on. The theory that I have is that somewhere on Karakuri Island, because Tsukimi is also from Karakuri, somewhere on Karakuri there was remnants of lost, ancient, advanced technology which child Vegapunk had the ability to learn from, and in some ways copy. So I want to make this clear, I'm not saying that Vegapunk is not a genius, because I think that they are. However, a thought occurs to me that Vegapunk might steal those ideas and make them better. But like I said, I apply this idea in other ways as well. Another fact that we know is that Vegapunk was a part of a research group with other scientists such as Judge Vinsmoke, and they worked on things like genetic alterations and enhancements, lineage factors. Again, I wonder whether Vegapunk stole some of the ideas of this research group from other scientists, but then made it better. But yeah, I like this theory, and it's still just a theory, but I'm really curious to see if it becomes something. Certainly with Vegapunk's belief that they're mediocre, right? It makes more sense. But yeah, the other reason that I like this idea is it's just realistic. If you guys know anything about scientific advancements, theories, that community, history, it's more common than I think that a lot of people would like to admit. Intellectual theft. In a lot of cases, it's unproven and or debatable, but there's a lot of theories out there, that famous scientists that you may know of who perhaps didn't invent the things that it's suggested that they did. As just one example, in a lot of history books, this is true for myself, Alexander Graham Bell is credited with inventing the telephone, but we pretty much know that that's not true. An Italian by the name of Antonio Meucci actually invented it first and filed a patent for it first, but he didn't renew the patent because he was poor. Then Bell filed his patent. Then he got a sweet gig working for a big-time company, Western Union. Meucci attempted to sue. He attempted to send his original sketches and drawings to, you guessed it, Western Union, and it just all conveniently disappeared for people to dig up later. But I'm not looking to step on anybody's toes. If this triggers you or you think that it's untrue in some way, I am no expert, but these are the kind of stories that are out there and they're plentiful for many of the most famous scientists in history. For Oda to have been inspired by these conspiracies and apply them to his genius, world-altering scientist Vegapunk would be brilliant. But anyway, some final thoughts here before we end the review. I'm really intrigued by Vegapunk's inventions. For instance, the shark. Like I said, I'm reminded of Laboon, and I just wonder whether the shark is kind of the next level of what Laboon is. Vegapunk mentioned it was difficult to overwrite some of base instincts. It suggests to me that maybe the shark started off as a real shark. And then we have the giant robot. The giant robot has eyes that look very real. And this could be looking too much into it. It's One Piece, things are drawn strange, not everything has to be important. But I kind of wonder whether or not the giant robot was originally a living being as well. Like, was originally a giant. In a way very similar to Frankie or Kuma, where nearly every part of the giant's body has been mechanized, and its autonomy and free will has been stripped away. The reason I think that this is an interesting theory with major complications is that's just straight up evil, right? There's like no other way of putting it. With Kuma, you can maybe justify that Vegapunk is a good guy because Kuma has some sort of agenda, but with the giant, we don't have that argument. A popular theory for a very long time has been that Vegapunk is a good guy, that ultimately he's going to be an ally of the Strats, and that's still possible and there's still evidence for it, but it may end up being complicated or just straight up untrue. Anyway guys, this is absolutely peak piece. This chapter was incredible. I'm so excited to see what happens next. But as always, guys, I'm curious as to what you think. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Remember to like, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad. And as always, have a wonderful day.